If you thought you could not be shocked anymore by the scandal of pedophile priests, prepare to be mistaken. Today, one of the most vocal and prominent priests in America is being roundly condemned for the views that he expressed in an interview with Catholic media. His name is Father Benedict Groeschel. He's a 79-year-old friar, a prodigious author, and he's the mainstay of EWTN, the Catholic cable TV network. You see him here in a video tribute to his 50 years in the priesthood. But he is not just a priest. He's not just a media figure. Father Groeschel has a PhD in psychology, and until very recently, he taught pastoral counseling to seminarians. For decades, he counseled troubled priests at a New York retreat house. So with all that in mind, here is what Father Groeschel told the National Catholic Register about priests who molest children. And I hope you're sitting down. Quote, "People have this picture in their minds of a person planning to, a psychopath, but that's not the case. Suppose you have a man having a nervous breakdown and the youngster comes after him. A lot of the cases, the youngster, 14, 16, 18, is the seducer." He goes on. It's not so hard to see a kid looking for a father and didn't have his own, and they won't be planning to get into heavy-duty sex, but almost romantic, embracing, kissing, perhaps sleeping, but not having intercourse or anything like that. Now for the fallout. The National Catholic Register pulled that interview and apologized for posting it in the very first place. Father Groeschel's own religious order, which he himself co-founded 25 years ago, has also apologized and suggested that Father Groeschel is not in his right mind. The Archdiocese of New York says this, and I'm going to quote for you. "What Father Groeschel said cannot be allowed to stand unchallenged. The sexual abuse of a minor is a crime, and whoever commits that crime deserves to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." And Father Benedict Groeschel, for his part, I want to read to you his statement in its entirety. "I apologize for my comments. I did not intend to blame the victim. A priest or anyone else who abuses a minor is always wrong and always responsible. My mind and my way of expressing myself are not as clear as they used to be. I have spent my life trying to help others the best that I could. I deeply regret any harm I have caused to anyone." I don't even know where to begin, but I am joined right now by a psychologist and sexual behavior scientist at the University of Toronto. James Cantor is also an editor-in-chief of Sexual Abuse, a journal of research and treatment. Dr. Cantor, thanks so much for joining me at this time. First of all, I can't believe that I'm having this interview with you. I can't believe what I read this morning. I can't believe that someone who has had so much involvement in the Catholic abuse tragedy that has transpired over the last decade would go anywhere near a comment like this. And I'd like to just get your initial reaction to hearing what I just reported.
Well, I can't say anything about this particular case, of course, but it is a statement that I've heard before, and that there are some people who believe. Usually when I hear this from psychologists and from other mental health professionals, it's because they tend to hear the point of view of the person who was accused or sometimes convicted of child molestation. So when one has that as a career and one sees large numbers of those people, it often becomes easy to start taking the stories that you hear at face value. From the point of view of the abuser, there was something that, from the point of view of the abuser, felt like a flirtation or felt like a come-on, and the abuser tended to see what they wanted to see. And then the therapists sometimes tend to automatically agree or fail to challenge the beliefs or statements that come from the abusers themselves. Again, I can't say that that's what happened in this particular situation, but I've seen that pattern before.
I don't know if it happened in this situation either, but all I know is that the comments continue, Dr. Cantor. And let me just say this before we go to break. I want to ask you after the break about what I'm just about to say. He referred to the Jerry Sandusky incident, and he actually referred to Jerry Sandusky as that poor guy. So after the break, I want to talk to you a little bit about what you think that could possibly mean with your extensive background in research. We're back in a moment. We are back with sexual behavior scientist James Cantor, who's trying to help us understand the comments of Father Benedict Groeschel. Father Groeschel is an author, a broadcaster, a counselor to fellow priests and seminarians. Father Groeschel today is apologizing for suggesting in an interview that young victims of pedophile priests may have in fact asked for it, even as young as 14. And you can see him here in a video tribute to his 50 years in the priesthood. Dr. Cantor, we went to break, and I asked you to think through those comments about the sympathy, the apparent sympathy for Jerry Sandusky, and I want to be more specific about what I'm asking, and that is his comments. Here is a direct quote from the National Catholic Register. It reads, "Here's this poor guy, Sandusky. It went on for years. Interesting. Why didn't anyone say anything? Apparently a number of kids knew about it and didn't break the ice. Well, you know, until recent years, people did not register in their minds that it was a crime." Doctor, just the notion of sympathy for someone like Sandusky?
Well, when one has a great deal of experience working with many abusers who are in many, many different situations, some of whom were abused themselves, and some of whom themselves have their own psychological issues and are hungry for affection. When one is a therapist and sees such a person over and over again, it can happen, and I've seen some psychologists and other mental health professionals almost over-empathize or cease to be appropriately critical of what they're told. And this sounds like that's one of those possibilities. Now, of course, it's good for a therapist to be able to muster sympathy and empathy for clients, but one can't have a mind that's so open that one's brain falls out.
Well, and that's where I'm getting to with this. I'm beyond understanding this. You know, I should mention here that Father Groeschel was a chaplain at a boys' home for troubled boys for 14 years. It's called Children's Village. I also want to read for you what he said about what sort of punishment should be meted out to to pedophiles, predators, child predators, particularly in reference to the priest scandal. He said this, and again, this is in his interview. "At this point, when any priest, any clergyman, any social worker, any teacher, any responsible person in society would become involved in a single sexual act, not necessarily intercourse, they're done. And I'm inclined to think on their first offense, they should not go to jail because their intention was not committing a crime." Doctor, the only thing I could think about was this man has been in contact with young boys for a long time. If this is the thinking he has now, is it possible anyone can extrapolate that maybe there's some problems in his past?
I mean, one can make that kind of an hypothesis, but I don't think there's really ever any way that we can know. I've never met any of the people involved in the situation. They've never undergone a relevant assessment that would give us any meaningful kind of an answer. But those kinds of trying very, very hard to look at things or see things or conclude that a situation is a certain way is something that can happen. We can fool ourselves into thinking many, many different things. It generally is not helpful to think of whether someone intended or didn't intend to commit a crime when they're becoming sexually involved with a very young person. We also have to remember that pedophilia technically is a sexual attraction to people who are either prepubescent or in the very early stages of puberty. By the time we're talking about 14, 16, and 8-year-old kids, these kids have they have a sex drive, they have a better idea of what sex drive is, and being attracted to people in that age is very often grossly inappropriate, especially from somebody who's involved with the kids in a professional manner. But technically, we wouldn't diagnose them as pedophiles. These are kids
legally
who
we
can
do.
Sometimes express. I'm sorry?
I was just going to say legally. I mean, technically maybe not, but certainly legally we do.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Well, legally we would be calling them child molesters, but that's different from the psychological or the psychiatric designation of pedophilia. It's often very important to distinguish between the sexual attraction to children and the actual acting on that sexual attraction, which would be sexual abuse or
I think
child
what's
molestation.
just standing out so glaringly is the apparent apologist here for the incidents of the past. Dr. Cantor, I want to thank you for joining us from Toronto with these insights. And there's something else I'd like to close with as well. well. It's one more comment from Father Grochel's Order of the Community of Christian Friars of the Renewal. This is what they said. In recent months, Father Grochel's health, memory, and cognitive ability have been failing. He has been in and out of the hospital. Although these factors do not excuse his comments, they help us understand how such a compassionate man could have said something so wrong, so insensitive, and so out of character.